In my previous video, we covered the Glide N64 graphics plugin for Rosalie's Mupen GUI, which has more of a focus on upscaling and enhancements. So in this video, we're going to be covering the awesome paraLLEI-RDP plugin, which has more of a focus on accuracy, compatibility, and performance. Now, paraLLEl is excellent for users that want to keep things as authentic as possible, or for people that want to upscale, but not too much that it ruins the overall N64 aesthetic. In that respect, it absolutely hits the sweet spot. Because of its focus on accuracy, there's not really too many options to cover, but of course I'm still going to be breaking all of these down. However, all of the VI options are going to be put into one section. So obviously you want to start Rosalie's UI up, and we need to make sure that two things are set: the actual plugin itself and the correct signal processor. So you want to click on this settings option in the top right hand corner. Then you want to go to the plugins tab and change the video plugin to paraLLEl. Then go down to the reality signal processor and change this to paraLLEI-RDP. Then just click OK. Then you need to click on this settings option in the top left hand corner and then just click on graphics. And this will bring up all of the options that are specific to this plugin. So starting with screen size, which does get confused with the internal resolution, but all this is the window size when you're in windowed mode. So set this to however you want it to be. This N64 resolution upscale option is the internal resolution. So none is the original resolution, and we can go ×2, ×4, or ×8 of that resolution. And as you can see, for ×8, it says high-end GPUs only. And that's because ×8 requires 5 to 6 gigs worth of VRAM. So make sure that you have that available if you're using this option. Now, one of the best things about this plugin is that it's essentially using software mode, but it's leveraging the GPU instead of the CPU, which makes it perform a hell of a lot better. And also when you're upscaling, you're not going to see hardly any issues, which is pretty awesome. Normally, I'd just say set your internal resolution as high as you can and move on, but that isn't really the correct advice for N64 graphics. And which one of these you choose really comes down to personal preference, especially with this plugin's focus on authenticity. The deinterlacer obviously gets rid of those interlacing lines by merging them, and there's two different options, bob and weave. Bob is the default and for the most part should do you just fine, but if it doesn't work, you can try weave instead. Now, downscaling is for people that want to increase their internal resolution to receive all the benefits of that, like reducing the amount of jaggies, but then want to output at a lower resolution to keep it looking a bit more authentic, kind of like having your cake and eating it. Also, by doing this, you're also applying super sample anti-aliasing, and that's because you're setting your output resolution lower than your internal resolution. So we can reduce our internal resolution to 1/2, 1/4, or 1/8 of that resolution. So because I've got my internal resolution set to ×4, when I set this to 1/2, I'm still increasing my internal resolution all the way up to 960, but I'm downscaling the output to 480p. And I'm applying ×4 super sample anti-aliasing at the same time. Also, at ×4, if I was to set this to 1/4, I'll be outputting at 240p, which is the native resolution, at the same time as applying ×16 super sample anti-aliasing. And this is meant to be the sweet spot if you're using shaders. If you are going to set the original res, definitely consider doing it the way I just showed you. You might even prefer the way that it looks. And for me, if an emulator has downsampling or downscaling options, I will definitely take advantage of them. So consider this a different way to dial back your resolution, but without sacrificing any of the benefits from increasing it. Quite a lot of N64 games don't fill the entire screen because of their overscan area, and you can crop that overscan out so they do with this option here, pixel by pixel. Vertical stretch really only comes in handy to display letterbox widescreen games in full screen, and I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that. So you need to hit force widescreen, then start the game, go to the in-game options and actually change it to its widescreen option, and then you can use the vertical stretch to get the correct aspect ratio. Not too tricky. Super sample dither, I recommend you leave on by default as it does make that dithering look a little bit nicer. Now, if I'm being honest, I'm not 100% certain on what super sampled RD RAM reads actually does. I think it helps with anti-aliasing, but I can't detect whether it's on or off. It's off out the box, so I recommend leaving it that way. And if you know exactly what this does, let me know in the comments below so I can pin it. So the N64 used what was called a video interface filter, which prepared the image before output, and that's what this plugin is attempting to emulate. So all of these VI options are each individual aspect of the video interface filter. The VI filter is being emulated to be as accurate to N64 graphics as possible, but with more modern digital displays in mind. For me, the VI emulation is where this plugin really shines. It allows you to upscale everything just enough, but without detracting from the original aesthetic, really hitting the sweet spot between upscaling and authenticity, which for N64 graphics is nigh on impossible. To go in depth with all of these VI options would take a video about an hour long, and nobody's got time for that. So all I'm going to do is put a before and after image up. On the left will be a before image at 1x with none of these options applied, and on the right again will be at 1x but with all of these VI options applied. As you can see, with no VI filtering, the image is much sharper. And with the VI filtering, things do look a little bit smoother and a little bit more blurry, but it's meant to look that way, as it's emulating that kind of effect that the N64 originally had. As per usual, which one of these you use comes down to your personal preference, and as per usual, I'm going to sit on the fence and say it depends on the game. Native text recs, I leave on by default. This forces all the 2D assets to display at the original resolution, because when you're upscaling these, they can break in various ways. And in my opinion, the 2D stuff looks better at the original resolution anyway. Now, some N64 games use texture LOD to apply filtering to textures depending on where they are in the scene, generally blurring them the further away they are. When native texture LOD is not active, it is not applying that filtering to those textures, leaving them to remain sharp all the way into the distance. It's not technically accurate, but it does look a hell of a lot better. So if you do want to turn it back on, you can do so with this option. Vertical sync with this emulator is recommended to leave it off by default for input latency reasons, and only turn it on if you're actually encountering screen tearing. Forced widescreen we've already kind of covered with the letterbox widescreen games, but we can also use this with games that use the anamorphic squash technique. All you need to do is activate forced widescreen, go to those in-game options, change it to 16:9, and that's it, you're in 16:9. To make the whole widescreen thing a little bit easier, I'm going to put a link in the description below that will take you to a list of games that use the letterbox widescreen mode and the anamorphic squash technique. Synchronize RDP and CPU is a performance option that when deactivated can greatly increase the native performance of some of these N64 games, in some cases getting you 10 plus additional frames per second. However, deactivating this for some games can create visual issues, so turn this off at your own discretion, and if you don't see any glitches, you're good to keep it off and enjoy the extra performance. Now, before I close out the video, there's a couple of things that I need to mention. Firstly, this plugin only uses Vulkan, so if you don't have that graphics backend for your graphics hardware, unfortunately you can't use it. Secondly, you can't save any of this on a per game basis, which is unfortunate, so just make sure that you dial in your defaults as best you can. There we go, that was my breakdown for the ParaLLEl graphics plugin. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I've already done this for the Glide N64 plugin, and I'll put a link for that video in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, slam me a thumbs up, and if you want to keep up to date with all of these, you know what to do. And apart from that, go play some games. Adios.